I'm Bria with Grown Folks Talking. Tune in every Wednesday for hot talks with the DFW community while we discuss music, politics, and love every Wednesday at 7 on Side A of the After Party. See you at the party. Hi, guys. You are tuned into Grown Folks Talking. Thank you so much for listening. I have two special guests. As always, Sandy B, and a very special guest, Miss Ashley, as we talk a little bit about feminism. But before we get started, I want to start with my favorite segment, the I Like It segment. We do the I Like It segment. We talk about what we like from this previous week. So it could be like, I like this music, or I like this show, or I like something that happened in politics, or really anything.
Okay.
Anything. So, Mom, would you like to start? Okay.
You start.
Okay, I'll start. So, this past week, what did I like? Well, I'll go with what I didn't like. We could do what we didn't like too.
Okay.
So, DISD, they have a new regulation. It is basically to bring in preschools into DISD. Now, what I don't like about it is the fact that although it's not technically a charter school, which is what makes it legal, because it's illegal to have charter schools. So it's not technically the charter schools, but the schools have the right to change the curriculum and to switch out the teachers or not have a DISD teacher. So that can be problematic for, I think, pretty obvious reasons, right? Like if you can change the curriculum without it being through the Texas, like what the usual curriculum is, and they have the say so. And then if you're paying for those schools because it's DISD, we're obviously paying taxes on it. And then if we turn around and don't have any say so in what's going on, I think that can be very problematic. So that's going to be what I didn't like from this past week, and it is, I think, SB 1882, maybe 1885. But yeah, I definitely didn't like that. And then something that I did like this past week is I got my hands on the Kat Von D foundation powder, and it was compliments of Influencer. So thank you so much for my Kat Von D palette. It is amazing. And then I also got the Kat Von D liner, and let me tell you, usually I suck at doing makeup, like I'm not good at it at all. But this liner was like literally drawn with a pencil on my face, so it worked perfect for me. But yeah, Mom.
Well, I like that most everything went great for me. Oh, and I got 24 long stem roses from my daughter last Thursday. So
I am pretty.
I was so surprised, and that was really the highlight of my last week. That was so awesome because Bria always usually sends me pictures of stuff. She'll send me pictures of flower arrangement.
Why would you say that?
It's the truth, right?
Why would you say that, Phil?
And she sends me pictures of Jimmy
Jimmy
Choo
Choo
shoes. So I got the real thing from my daughter. So that was really special.
No comment. So what did you like from this previous week?
Okay, so well, I guess I'll start with whatever I didn't like. I didn't like whatever Trump did. I'm sure
What did he do?
it just
Anything.
exists.
It just
okay.
goes in that realm.
Oh, okay.
Just exists. Just be a person on
Oh,
this
yeah.
planet.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I didn't like.
Yeah.
What I did like was I'm trying to think. What did I like this week? I saw a clip earlier today on Twitter of this Danish economist who at the Davos summit a few weeks or so ago, he was just basically kind of calling all the billionaires out for, how they don't pay taxes. And
Like
so,
Netflix.
huh?
Netflix.
A case in point, yes,
Ooh,
like Netflix,
my
like
God.
yeah. But as far as like just the fact that how they don't pay enough in taxes or they don't pay taxes, period. And so I saw a clip today of him on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox, and he was just basically kind of like reading him for filth just for how much trash he is. And Carlson was like, "Oh, whatever, you suck." and he like cussed him off and then
Uh-huh.
cussed him out, and then that was the end of the clip. And Carlson ended up not airing it on his show,
Oh.
but it
Oh.
ended up, but they were recording it, I guess, in Denmark or wherever the guy was, and
Mm.
so
Yeah.
they released their tape of it. So I was
Messy,
like,
messy.
yes, we stand a messy queen. Yes,
Yes,
come
yes.
through. Yes,
I love it.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, that was what I didn't like and what I liked.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
so it's 2 in 1.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
yeah,
Okay, cool. So obviously it's Black History Month, and with
Yes,
it
it
being
is.
Black History Month, we all of us at the table, we're Black and we're also women. And I thought it would be good to have a conversation about what it's like and if it is good for a Black woman to be a feminist. I personally thought that this conversation was important because whenever it was the Women's March, I had a conflict with myself because I'm like, um, obviously, Black women as a whole, we have a different dilemma or a different fight than that of a white woman, right?
Right.
It's just,
Very
reality.
true.
So I'm like, is being a feminist problematic or does it actually bring a change and does it help Black women? And this lovely lady, I felt like she would be the perfect person to have this conversation. It's really funny because when I asked her to come, it was very awkward. I was like, "Well, I've been watching you, and I really want you to join this." She's like, "What?"
like wait, what? I'm sorry, huh?
But yes,
I'm listening.
she would be the perfect person. So I think it'd be good to start with like why you're the perfect person to have this conversation with.
Okay. Well, I have a degree in political science,
Mhm.
and I minored in women's and gender studies.
Mm.
And pretty much, I wrote a thesis as part of my senior project. Rather, a lot of my research, kind of, or rather, my interests really kind of lie in politics and gender and race. And even sexuality to an extent, but mostly in regard to race, gender, and how those intersect.
Mhm.
And so the thesis that I wrote in my undergrad was about um, there's this woman, Barbara Wexler, in like the 60s, who wrote this article called "The Cult of True Womanhood."
Mhm.
And so basically, she was saying that, and it kind of takes place, and she's writing within the context of
Mhm.
Victorian times, and she talks about how women were expected, how women had like four different tenets they had to kind of adhere to. It was piety, purity, domesticity, and submissiveness. And
Mhm.
the more you kind of aspire to maintain these qualities, the
Mhm.
more of a woman,
You
the
became.
yeah, the more of a woman you were considered by society,
Mhm.
the more
Right.
worthy of respect and
Right. Right.
reverence as a woman you were considered.
Mhm.
And so what I wrote about was how, as Black women, these tenets were never historically available to us because, for example, when we were enslaved, our bodies weren't our own, so
They weren't.
we couldn't maintain purity.
That's right.
um Submissiveness, I mean, yeah, in the context of slavery, but in regard to like submissiveness and domesticity, like again, those were things that weren't available to us
Right.
because there wasn't really the same gendered division of labor,
Right.
Mhm.
that you see, like we were out in the fields with the men.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think piety, we couldn't read, so
Mm-mm.
we weren't able to kind of practice religion in the same way that white women were.
Mhm.
So basically, I was saying that since these tenets were never really available to Black women in the way that they were to white women, that by society, so in society's eyes, were not really considered true women or worthy of that.
Mhm.
Um, Worthy of the same respect that white
The
women
woman.
receive.
Right.
Right.
And then to make it to tie it kind of into politics is that I talked about that in relation to how racism and misogyny against Black women,
Yes.
aka misogynoir, how they shape the rhetoric around public policy,
Mhm.
specifically in regard to welfare reform.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
like the welfare queen stereotype,
Right.
and just kind of just like attitudes around social programs and stuff like that. So,
Right.
long story short, I'm saying all this to say
Mhm.
that, I've got a good background in
Mhm.
gender studies and,
Mhm.
just feminist theory, and then again, like I said, my political research and interests tend to really kind of rest in the areas of
Right.
race and gender and how they intersect and how that affects Black women.
Right. I love it. I love it all. Well
Yeah.
educated. The perfect person.
Yeah.
Yes. So just let's just go. Like, can a black woman be a true feminist?
Yes.
Yes. So by definition, a black woman can be a feminist. So like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because well, there's the issue with feminism is that since historically it's really the mainstream feminist movements, I should say rather,
mhm,
have historically been focused on white, middle class,
mhm,
able-bodied,
Mhm.
cisgender,
mhm,
heterosexual women.
mhm,
So since the mainstream movements have typically focused on like this very typical white woman, that's a lot of the reason why Black women tend to not identify as a feminist, and then also too, the they've we've historically also experienced racism
Right.
within these
right,
mainstream movements.
Of
exactly.
course.
Case in point, the first wave of the suffragettes back in the late 19th, early 20th century. There was a big march on Washington in 1913, and all the women were like, "We want to go on a march on Washington. Write the vote. Yeah, the 19th Amendment." And this group of deltas, where they were like, "Hey, we want to march with you guys. We're down for this voting thing too." And the white women were like, "Oh, that's fine, but you got to like march in the back behind the rest of us." And the deltas were like, "Okay." Because they saw value in the cause.
Right.
So yeah, just white women being racist, and
Right.
then also too, after the 15th Amendment was passed to where Black men got the vote before women were able to get the vote, their racism really jumped out. I know Elizabeth Cady Stanton specifically. I'm not quoting her exactly. I don't recall her quote specifically, but she said something along the lines of like that the right to vote was wasted on Black men because all they do is get drunk and rape white women.
Oh wow.
Oh
Yeah, so
Oh
my.
wow.
yeah. So a
Wow.
lot of the white women's racism really jumped out after Black men got the vote before
Mhm.
women got
Yeah.
the vote.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
that. And then also too, when you look at the women's movement of the 60s and 70s, again, it was very much so centered on white middle class women.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um
Mhm.
Very true.
and so whenever Black or even other women of color in general would, be like, "Okay, hey, so yeah, we're talking about sexism. I also experience racism. Do. These are the things that I experience."
Mhm.
A lot of white women were like, "Okay, but you're being divisive. Like we're talking about,
Mhm.
Mhm.
it was very much like anybody getting up and talking about the different ways in which they experience oppression was seen as divisive."
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's why a lot of the reason that a lot of Black women tend to not identify with feminism, and that's understandable.
Mhm.
At the same time, though, um, a lot of Black women do understand the role that oppression plays in our lives. The fact that we experience,
Right.
sexism, the fact that we experience misogyny, the fact that we
Mhm.
experience racism.
Mhm.
For queer Black women, they experience, homophobia and transphobia. Class is a huge issue. The
Yes.
fact that,
Right.
my experience as a middle class Black woman is going to be different from that
Of a
of
white
a
woman.
of a well, not just a white
White
woman, but
anybody.
just like of a poor Black woman.
Oh
So
yes.
our lived
Yes.
experiences are going to be different as
Yes.
well. So I mean, there are a lot of intersections there. So I mean,
Right.
Black women can definitely be feminists. The feminist movement, I think, has really grown over time. I mean, obviously there are still some white feminists, white liberal feminists, and I don't mean liberal as far as like political ideology. When I say liberal, I'm referring more to like the political theory of liberalism, where
Which would be
well.
educators on that one because I have no idea what you mean.
So okay, so case in point, the suffragettes were textbook liberal feminists.
Mhm.
Their goal was they felt as though getting the 19th Amendment on the books, getting women the right to vote, that's going to take care of everything.
Okay.
Kind of same thing with the feminists of the 70s with the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, just
Mhm.
kind of focusing on like getting that done. As long as we can just get some laws on the books,
Mhm.
making us equal to men,
Right.
we're good. And like, no, there's a
Yes.
lot more. I mean, look at the
Lot
Right.
more.
Civil Rights Amendment.
Mhm.
That's on the books, and it did do a lot, but
But
there's still a lot of like
A lot more to
cultural
do.
things that
yes.
yeah
Right. Right. Right.
that didn't address. Um,
And I'm happy that you did say
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality. So I was reading earlier. I have notes here. I read about Kimberly Crenshaw.
Yes. Sorry, I'm
And
getting over the flu.
no, I hope you feel better. No, but so Kimberly Crenshaw, it was a lot to read, and basically it was how, like how I said earlier, being black and being a woman, we have totally different, like it's different issues.
Was it the
and different-
demarginalizing race and gender? Okay.
exactly. So and then I also found another word. It was womanism.
Womanism, yeah, Alice
Womanism?
Walker.
Yeah. So there's the intersexuality, and then there's womanism, and then like there were like different tiers or like different forms of feminism for black women.
Mhm.
Do you like? What's the difference in all of those?
Well, intersectionality. So Kimberly Crenshaw is a law professor. She teaches at UCLA in Columbia right now, if I'm recalling correctly. But she's a law professor, and she wrote this article in 1983 called "Demarginalizing Race and Sex," and there's kind of like a subtopic to it.
Mhm.
And basically, what she does is she goes through these 3 different court cases, and kind of details how black women had filed suit against their employers
Right.
claiming discrimination, but for various reasons. Usually, it was that you could either be discriminated on against the base on the basis of race, or you could be discriminated against on the basis of gender, but not both. And
Right.
black women experience both racism and sexism. So I know one of the cases was. I think it might have been General Motors, where some black women sued, but basically, the court found that they weren't discriminated against because the company hired black people and the company hired women, but the issue was that the black people were all men, and then the women were all white. There's a
Okay.
YouTuber, Kat Black, KatBlaqe, that has a video that I think that she put up within the last few weeks or so talking about intersectionality. She does a really good job breaking it down. If anybody wants to listen to that.
We'll have to check that out.
But yeah, intersectionality is really just about kind of recognizing the intersecting identities that we have, whether it be as uh, whether it be race, gender, sex, class, all these different things. And the way, and that also kind of ties into Patricia Hill Collins, and she talks about like the Matrix of Domination, where we, in these different identities that we have, in some ways we are oppressed, and then in some ways we are also the oppressor.
Yes.
Like, so for example, earlier I mentioned that I'm a middle class black woman. um you know so as a black person, as a woman, I experience oppression, but at the same time, because of my class, I mean, I have a full-time job, I have
Right.
health benefits, I make good money.
Yes.
I don't have to worry about paying my light bill, or
Right.
making my car payment, or I don't have the same level of financial stress that
Some other
that
people
someone
may.
else has. So in regard to class status or socioeconomic status, I am privileged.
Right.
I am
right.
I am
Right.
part of that, that aspect. So I guess maybe it's a better way to look at it, as far as like being privileged and being versus being marginalized, as opposed to oppressor or oppressed. But yeah, so intersectionality, just kind of like I said, is about understanding, or trying to make space for the most marginalized people in any kind of movement.
Okay.
Womanism.
And I liked womanism.
You did.
I did. I liked
See, I don't
womanism
like
a lot.
womanism.
Well, I mean, I like it surface level from what I read today, right? Or in the past couple of days. So basically, what stood out to me was the fact that, and I have it here, it says, like, unlike feminism, and despite its name, womanism, it does not emphasize or privilege gender or sexism. Rather, it elevates all sides and forms of oppression to a level of equal concern and action. So, like, from my understanding, that means that instead of saying, okay, we need like better than men, or like we're better than men, it's like we should be on the same
Level. as
same
men.
level.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think feminism is necessarily saying that we need to be better than men.
Yeah.
The way Alice Walker kind of described womanism was, she said that um, feminism is to womanism as lavender is to purple. So
Okay.
she kind of described womanism as kind of being this um, deeper flavor of feminism, if you will. There's definitely like a spiritual aspect to womanism that you don't find.
Spiritual in like in what way?
Um,
What do you mean?
Well, see, and this is the part because I'm not a very spiritual person.
Mhm.
This is the part of womanism where I kind of tended to like check out and stuff in my theory class where I'm like, okay, this is lame, this is corny, but just and it's just spiritual in um kind of a granola type way, like being in tune with the earth
Is it
and the
like
moon
that
and the
one book,
stars
the
and the.
wolf, the women that are wolves?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
It's a book to where it's like I don't know. I'm gonna Google it and then I'll get back to you. But it's basically a book to where it's about women and it's about womanhood and it's like being one with nature and one with the earth and like that's when you're true. I'm gonna
I
Google
don't
it.
know what book you're talking about, but that does sound womanism ish. Because like I said, it's there's definitely a spiritual component to it.
Women who run with the wolves.
Okay, yeah, I
Yes,
don't know what that
yes,
is.
that's what it's called.
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a very like spiritual, very being one with the energy and in the sun and the moon and the
That's
stars
all
and
my. That's up my alley. That's right there. That's for me.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So womanism, that might be your thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like womanism was created by black women, by a black woman rather,
Mhm.
and for black women. So, or rather, women of color, I should say, um, is how she characterized it.
Mhm.
But womanism was really kind of just something like a space for black women to kind of do, um, to kind of recognize and do their own thing uh, really in the face of the adversity that black women experienced in like the 60s and 70s
Right.
in
Right.
the mainstream women's movement.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's pretty much womanism
Mhm.
at like a very basic level.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything in? You've been really quiet. You've never been this quiet before.
Well, she's very informative. I like it.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
Okay, I'm glad.
Well, good.
Yeah.
And then another problematic thing.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I have to ask all the questions and make sure all of it's answered. So it's like allies,
Okay.
right? So our feminist true allies of the black community, like opinion. Obviously, you can't speak for all, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But like from your opinion, since you are a feminist, do you think that they are like for Black Lives Matter, for example? Not that you
Right,
have to be for that one specifically to
Right,
be for
right,
the
right.
black community, but like, do you think like in honesty that feminists are genuinely for the black community?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I know if, yeah, there's a. I know it's mostly black men. You have some black women in there too, but it's a lot of it is black men will be like, oh, feminism is destroying, the black community. It's there to emasculate the black man. What these men tend to not realize is that they we live in a patriarchy. So these men, like even we live in a white supremacist patriarchy. So even though black men don't enjoy race privilege, they still enjoy gender privilege.
They
Okay.
do.
Okay.
So, you know, and it's kind of like with white people where any attempt to um it's kind of like when with white people when kind of any attempt where black people are like, hey, so we're experiencing this thing, this is an issue that affects us, and white people are just kind of like, what are y'all griping about, like what's the problem?
They sure do.
It's kind of like that in regard
Right,
to
right,
like
right.
black men with feminism,
Mhm.
because they still want to maintain that role as the page as the patriarch in like the household and the family. Um, they will. There's an essay by Cheryl Clark in a book called This Bridge Called My Back, and it's the article, it's her essay is called like lesbianism is an act of resistance, and she says that like black men are resentful because were it not for their race they would be just as equal as white men, and so that's
Mm.
kind of why they tend to want to, at least in my experience, just my opinion, um, that they kind of tend to want us to kind of fall in line
Mhm.
and place our blackness over our gender, over our womanhood, because that excuse me, allows there to be like this, you know, this facade of unity within the community.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I can stand with you, and be like, be black pride all day long. But at the same time, if I'm experiencing things as a woman,
Then you don't want to hear about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, we can't be unified. Like, if you're not going to recognize your privilege in this patriarchy and the ways in which you maintain, sexist systems of oppression against me,
Right.
the
Right.
way that you want to maintain my oppression, you don't have a problem with that, because you still are kind of in competition at sometimes with white men, as far as wanting to, I don't want to say be them, but you see the level of privilege that they have in society at the
Right.
top
Yes.
of the hierarchy, and you're in your feelings about that. Um, so yeah, I kind of want to find a tangent a little bit. Don't quite know where I was going with that, but yeah. No,
No, we heard you loud and clear.
no, and I mean, plus, like, black women have typically been the backbone of the black community since day one.
Yeah.
We really have.
I
That's very
mean,
true.
I personally have always felt that the way that black women are meant to be or supposed to be the backbone, it irritates my soul. And it is partially why I'm very as far as like household duties and like how
Yeah.
the black woman's supposed to have the job, which I was going to get into this before, but I feel like we need to skip to it. But so a lot of the time, and I found this stalking your Twitter actually, just so you know. A lot of the time, white women complain, and I saw this on your Twitter. Like, she tweeted this literally, and
Wait,
it
I
was
tweeted
like,
this, or I
no,
retweeted something?
you retweeted this, you retweeted this,
Okay.
but she tweeted this
Okay,
literally,
okay.
word for word, and it was like basically saying like feminism ruined her life because she worked 40 hours a week. She wasn't able to have the family, and she wasn't able to like have the love and
Okay,
the
I know what you're
husband
talking
and
about.
like all this like the fairy tale life, right? Because she worked, and like that's why feminism ruins families, right? Now, my thing with that one is, which I see this all the time, she's literally complaining about being able to work 40 hours a week and saying that that's why she didn't start her family and why she couldn't have kids. Meanwhile, there are black women who want to be able to work that hard because they have children and they have to take care of them by their freaking selves. So it's like, are we really fighting the same fight? Or like, how can that disconnect right there of genuinely complaining about it and saying that's why you can't have your family, literally someone with a family that has to do it on their own,
Yeah.
is begging for the same like the same right?
Yeah, I mean, that whole premise is kind of, I mean, that
That's
I
a
mean,
joke.
yeah, that whole argument is flawed, because I mean, there are so many millions of women, and not just black women, but just women in
Right,
general,
right.
that are working full time and
Yes.
having families.
Mhm.
And again, a lot of the times, black women never really had the choice but
There
to
you go.
work and raise their families.
Exactly.
All by
Because that
themselves.
was one of the big things with the feminist movement, the mainstream feminist movement, I should say, in the 60s. Was this white woman named Betty Friedan had written this book called The Feminine Mystique. And basically, she had went into like these middle class white neighborhoods and interviewed all these white women, and they were like, I just feel so sad and unfulfilled. Like, my life, all I do is just, my husband gets up and goes to work, and I stay home and I clean the house, and I, I fix my kids lunch, and I make sure dinner's on the table when Steve gets home, and I'm just so unfulfilled. And so, she writes about how all these women, again, all middle class white women, are so unfulfilled because they're living their lives for their husbands and their families. And that kind of caused this like awakening across America, where all these middle class white women were like, you know what? I want that's, equality. I want to work. I want to get equal pay. Do. And meanwhile, black and poor women were like, what are y'all talking about? Like, we've been working this whole time.
Right?
And raising kids the whole time.
Yes.
Like,
Because
what?
we have to.
Like, y'all are late.
Yes.
And one of the biggest critiques of Betty Friedan, um, of Betty Friedan in that book, was that A, she only talked to middle class white women.
Right.
And then also, two, when these middle class white women get up and go get these jobs, who do you think is going to take care of their kids?
The black woman.
It's going to be black
Yeah.
women or Latino or just other
Yeah.
women of color in
Yeah.
general. Yeah. So again, kind of recognizing, and this is where I think, a lot of the intersectionality, or rather kind of like this latest movement of intersectional feminism comes in, is how important it is for women, and especially white women, to understand and kind of be able to look at situations like that critically and realize, okay, so when we're talking about all these white women going to work, like
Mhm.
understanding that the women who most likely are going to be called in to watch these kids and leave their kids are going to be, again, black
Mhm.
and other women of
Mhm.
color,
Mhm.
and just kind of understanding, like their privilege in society, the fact that we live in a white supremacist patriarchy,
Mhm.
and just understanding that even though they are women, like, you're still white in a society that prioritizes whiteness.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so that's why it's important, to understand that and to be intersectional with your feminism and to try to center the most marginalized groups.
Right. Okay. I was so annoyed when I saw that tweet.
Because I was just like, girl, bye.
Right? What are you mad for? People have
Yeah.
to, but it is what it is. And then, what about the LGBTQ? Would they be, or do you think that they would be allies to the black community
Well,
as well? I know that's a little off topic because we were obviously speaking on
no,
feminism,
no, no,
Well, it's
no,
gender.
but
Yeah.
no, 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 no. This definitely plays into it. Okay, so first of all, and this is something that comes up kind of often when you're talking about, like, civil rights in regard to race, and then
Mhm.
like queer issues and rights. Like, first and
Is it
foremost,
politically correct to say queer?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
a lot of people identify as queer. It's
yeah,
kind of,
that's why it's the Q at the end.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, some people, some people don't may identify as gay. Some people might identify as lesbian. Some people like to say queer just because it's kind of a catch-all, if you will.
Okay.
So yeah, no, yeah, you can say queer. Yeah. But so you're talking about like black. You're talking about queer. First of all, intersections.
Mhm.
Black queer people exist.
Mhm.
Okay.
So a lot of times you see like a lot of like the ashy Twitter contingent talking about like, oh,
The
you know,
ashy.
well, yeah, well, they'd be like, oh yeah, because I see comments all the time where like, oh, like the gay agenda, the like gay this, gay
Mhm.
that, but black people did it to do, and it's like, y'all know black queer people exist though, right?
Right.
Like there are black gay men, there are black gay women, like black lesbians, like they exist.
Right.
So I mean, like first and foremost, like whenever people talk about like black versus gay, it's like there's an intersection there.
Right. Right.
But also, it's really important to include the queer community in feminism because I mean, a lot of those well, not first, but a lot of the black feminists of the 60s and 70s were queer women, like Audre
Mm.
Lorde, Barbara Smith, one of my faves.
I didn't know that.
Um, uh, I think Alice Walker may have been a lesbian. I'm not
Wasn't she
100%.
a madam?
Are you thinking about CJ Walker?
Yeah. Okay.
It's okay. We all have brain toots. Um, but yeah, Audre Lorde, Barbara Smith, uh, Cheryl Clark, like a lot of the biggest like theorists from the 60s and 70s were
Work gay.
black lesbians. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Okay.
Um, there's even a section so this book that I referenced before, this bridge called My Back,
Mhm.
it's a collection of essays by all women of color.
Right.
So there's black women, Chicana women, Asian, and Native American women. And I think if I recall correctly, it's been a while since I've read it, but there's a whole section where they're talking about like racism in the mainstream. Another section where they're talking about like their experiences as queer women of color. Like there's a whole section on that. One of the things about feminism that I think is really important is kind of the understanding of gender as being a social construct. And what I mean by social construct is that gender isn't something that is kind of based on anything real. Gender is really what we make of it.
Mhm.
And we know it's a social construct because gender is different. Gender changes over time, space, and location. What we consider as masculine and feminine in the United States in 2019 is different than what was considered masculine and feminine in the United States in,
In
I don't know,
2014.
1873.
Oh yeah.
It's different than when they consider you know what's masculine and feminine in Samoa or any other,
Oh, of
in
course.
different
Yeah.
cultures and societies.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean when I say gender is a social construct, is because there's no, like, it really is all that we make of it. So um
Yeah, because in some countries you would be stoned or killed to come out and say you're gay
yeah, and I mean,
or
and
queer.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I mean, it's yeah, it's when whatever term is, as long as it's not like a derogatory, is good. Um, but that's really important in feminism, is because when we were talking earlier, I said, like, feminism to me is largely about dismantling systems of oppression, and racism is a system of oppression that
Yes,
affects
it is.
women. Homophobia is a system of oppression
Mhm.
that affects
Mhm.
women. Transphobia is a system of oppression that affects women. So
Transphobia.
transphobia,
What is that one?
against homophobia. It's like homophobia, but like against
Against
trans
trans.
Oh,
people.
about the transgenders.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
transgender people. Yeah.
Okay.
Um. So again, like, that's why I say, like, feminism, being about dismantling all these systems of oppression. You know, if That's why I always say, like, you can't say that you're for black liberation unless you're for the liberation of all black people, and that
Mhm.
includes black trans people, black gay people, queer black people, disabled black people, poor black people.
Right.
Like, it
Right.
has to be all. If all of us aren't free, then none of us are free.
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of a big issue that you see with a lot of, like, homophobic, like, black men and women,
Mhm.
where they don't stand up or show up for queer black people. And it's like, again, are you really for black liberation if you're not for the liberation of all black people from
Right.
their
Right. Right.
oppression? I don't
Mhm.
think you are. So yeah, no, queer people definitely have a space in feminism. Like
Mhm.
I said, a lot of the biggest thinkers from the 70s were queer black women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I did a survey, which I'm gonna give the results later. But I did a
Okay.
survey of like some of the questions that I'm asking you, and I'm gonna let you know how a lot of others felt, which most of them would agree with you actually. And then so in regards to feminism, like and then with race, a lot of the time Black women are looked at as a lot of other races and
Okay.
cultures, they want to be like us. Like, it's just a thing. Sorry. Whether it be like the lips, obviously,
Mhm.
or the butt,
The butt. Oh my
or
God.
whether it's something that's on the outer appearance.
Hmm.
But nobody really talks about how the way they also want to be like us in regards to how strong we are,
Right.
or just how how resilient we are, right?
Right.
Um, One thing that I saw recently, and the only reason I'm bringing this one up is because it's the most recent occurrence that I have seen, as far as like in like I don't know, on TV, right?
Yeah.
So the situation with Monique.
Oh my God. Yes. That's
Yeah.
so sad.
So I honestly didn't follow the entire story. I saw a couple of the interviews that she did and how
Mhm.
everyone was very dismissive with her, and like she would react, obviously, because everyone was so dismissive, right?
Right.
And she would react. And then so the other day, maybe like last week, I saw that she was on the Real, and they were shady as I don't know what. Um, I'm not gonna say specifically who, but they were so shady towards one another. And then the point I'm getting at is Adrienne Bailon. She said that like basically just because you're loud, speaking to Monique, doesn't mean you're right. That's right. And I feel like everything she said was like, okay, Monique is loud. She's yelling. She's doing this. She's doing that. And that's how she thinks she needs to get a point across. But you don't have to do all that to be loud. Okay, that's fine. But she's the same person that always says how she loves how Cardi B is so loud and extra and over the top and does the most. So when I saw that, I thought to myself, because I don't know that anybody else noticed it or, thought twice about it, but it's like, when it's not a black woman and they're loud and they're extra and they're doing the absolute most, oh, she feisty. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. That is very true.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, she's extra. I like it. Like she's sassy. That's
That's what
that's
it,
one
it
too.
is. Say sassy.
But when it's a
But when
black
it's a
woman,
black woman,
she's bitter. She's
she's
angry. She's
angry.
this.
Yeah,
She's
She's that.
mad.
that's a whole trope called the angry black woman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh huh.
Yeah. So yeah, Yeah, that's a very yeah. So the whole thing with like the angry black woman is where was I going with this for a second? Yeah, as far as like Monique being like loud and stuff, I mean,
But that's what we fell in love with.
Right.
Her
That's true.
raunchiness, her loudness, her boldness. And so
yeah.
now you
I never thought about that.
now you
That
want to
is what
throw
she
it
is, a
away.
comedian.
That she's a
Well,
comedian.
I
She's
think part of the issue is that she's not talking like it's
well the
it
issue
that's
now
Hold on.
palatable when she's saying something that people like
Mhm.
and when they can laugh at and have
right.
fun
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
But when she's talking about serious stuff and how she's been wronged
Mhm.
by, the
Right.
industry
Right.
or Oprah or Lee
Or
Daniels or
Or whoever.
whoever,
Tyler.
Uh-huh.
Tyler, yeah. Whenever she's talking about real stuff,
They don't want to talk
then,
about it.
it's like, oh, I don't want to hear that. Make me laugh.
Well, see,
Mhm.
the main thing with the Monique thing is nobody wants to get blackballed. And Steve
Yeah.
Harvey basically said that, you know,
Yeah.
he said at the end of the day, my grandkids are dependent on me, my children are dependent on me, my family is dependent on me. If I don't make it happen, nothing happens. But with that being said,
Yeah.
you got to look at it like this. Does that make you a sellout or what? You know what I mean?
Does it?
Yeah.
Like Steve did a skit.
I know what you're talking about.
He did a skit and he said, "You could say that I'm that big lip monkey that
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
he said all that and he said, "You damn right. I'll be that big lip monkey, but I got $1 million in my pocket. What's in your bank account?" So,
Mhm.
for money will you sell your soul?
I mean, it
I
seems
mean,
like he's the type that would, because I mean, my thing is
yeah,
like all
yeah, he
money isn't
has.
good money.
Right.
Yeah, all money isn't good
So, I
money.
mean, if that's what you want to do to get your coins,
Right.
and then also too, I mean, it gets to a point like where Steve Harvey is at now. Like, my
He don't
dude,
even
like
have
you're
to
You
do
don't
good.
even
that.
need
You
that,
don't
bro.
have to do
Yeah,
that.
Like, why are you
yeah.
tripping
You
so
don't have to
hard?
do all this tap dancing and shucking
Mhm.
and jiving
Yeah.
that
Ooh,
you're
not the
doing now.
tab.
Yeah, yeah,
Amos and
straight
Andy.
yowza, yowza, yowza. Yeah, you don't
Amos
have
and
to do all
Andy.
that
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
now.
don't have to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're good. So yeah, that whole situation was a mess. I mean, that was just like a textbook example of, somebody like talking over a black woman
Mhm.
and just yeah, that was just a mess. I mean, I can't speak like too informed on it just because I hate Steve Harvey, so I didn't even really like watch the clip that much just because he's just
Mhm.
annoying and a trash person. I just don't bang with him.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but now you did mention something earlier as far as like the strength and resilience of black women.
Mhm.
Um, Joan Morgan wrote a book. It's probably like maybe like $10 on Amazon if you pick it up, called "When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost." And it's
What?
kind of about like hip hop feminism. It was written like in the mid to late 90s
Mhm.
ish.
Mhm.
And so one of the chapters she talks about um, black women, being perceived as strong and resilient, like you said, but how that's not necessarily a good thing
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
because what was us being born and resilient? What was us being strong and resilient? What was resilient? What was that born out of? It was born out of trauma. The fact that
Right.
we
Mhm.
had to be,
Mhm.
the fact that
Mhm.
we,
Yeah.
had gone through so
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
So there's that. The fact that we're like these, we're these like strong black women because we've
Mhm.
endured,
Mhm.
Mhm.
literal hell
Mhm.
to where we had to do that. And then also too, when you're this strong black woman, there's often the issue of you feeling like you can't let your guard down
Mhm.
Right.
because
It's you against the world.
exactly, it's you
Right.
against the world, that like you can't make the space to say, you know what, I'm struggling, I need help, because
Mhm.
no, I'm supposed to be the strong black
Right.
woman and I can
Right.
do
Right. Right.
anything.
Mhm.
So I mean, I think that's definitely a conversation that um the community really kind of needs to have, as far, because I see that all the time. We're like, strong black woman, strong black woman, strong black woman,
But what does
and
that
I'm like,
detail?
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Like,
Mhm.
what are you putting yourself through to maintain, to keep telling yourself, I'm a strong blak woman, I'm a strong, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so like I said, When Chicken Nuts Come Home to Roost by Joe Morgan.
You
Okay.
know what? We had a lady on the show. Her name was Miss Marsha Johnson.
Oh, from Afia? I
Yes.
love her.
She is amazing. Well, she's the one that had the billboard up. And so we were engaged in a conversation and she was telling us, she said, the average 40-year-old black woman is really 55 because of the mere fact most black women, not all, when you say most, because I know somebody will tweet Bria and say, "Your mom said." Okay, so let's take a divorced mother or a single mother that's 45. Her body is really like 55. She's had to work, maybe work two jobs, raise her
The
kids,
stress.
the stress of her children, because you got to take on your problems and these other people problems, and it just weighs you down. And then stress causes cancer. Stress causes other things. Your body starts deteriorating, and so it's sad that we put all these things off on the black woman. And so that goes back to you saying how strong is strong. And I think that we as a people should stop that. You know, where where's my help? You know what
Well,
I
I'm
mean?
happy that y'all mentioned that because, like I said, like a lot of other races, like, oh, I want to be like that, or they want to put on this facade, but at the end of the day,
They
you
don't.
don't.
You don't.
You know?
Well, it's like Paul Mooney said. Everybody, can we say the N word?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
We're like Paul Mooney said. Everybody wants to be a nigga, but nobody wants to be a nigga.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want what they said. They want the rhythm, but not the blues.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then last example would be like the J Lo and the Motown. Ooh, look at the rolling of the
my
eyes.
God.
Why is J Lo even doing that?
Oh
That
my
is
gosh.
a slap.
Like, look, okay, you know what, J Lo? Like, first of all, you look amazing.
Amazing.
She does.
That body,
Beautiful.
sis, is banging.
Gorgeous.
Well, if you had
waiting
that
for
money,
tonight
it
was
would
a
be.
bop. She's got her
I mean, yeah.
jams. I definitely want to give J Lo her
Yeah.
things. Like,
Yeah,
I
she,
of
still
course.
she deserves her things.
Yes.
still love her.
At the same time, though, for a Motown tribute,
Yeah.
you don't have the range, beloved.
Oh.
Not
don't
only
have the
does she
range.
not have the range, she's just the wrong person.
She
They
really
could
was.
have got India.Arie. They could have got anybody.
All
Lauren
the
Hill.
black people in music.
All the black
Like,
people that
y'all
sing
had
music.
so many options.
And that's
My
what
thing
you
is,
do.
when it comes to like certain things like that, I feel like we don't put the way that other cultures do, like a country like award show.
Yeah,
They
not gonna
wouldn't
do it.
say, "Oh, let's choose this black girl." You
They
know what
would-
I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, they
or
wouldn't
this
say,
Chicana.
Let's get
you know what I'm
the
saying?
Amigos to host this.
Exactly. They wouldn't choose Migos to host country awards. So why are we?
You know what
You
we
know what
do?
I'm saying?
We always try to appease them.
But see, that's not us though. Like, there's no black people at the head of the Grammys. And that whoever put together that, I guarantee you that was not some black people.
To do Motown?
You don't think so?
To as far as like producers of the Grammys,
Oh, yeah.
that were so whoever's like, ooh, we're gonna do a Motown tribute, let's call J Lo. That was not some black people. That was some white folks.
You don't think so? Okay.
I would bet cash money that was
Okay.
not some black
If you
folks.
That
that
was some-
sure,
No,
I
that was
hear
some
you,
black
sis.
people that act like Steve Harvey.
I don't know.
Yeah.
that
We'll have to
producer-
look into that.
Yeah, we'll have to look into
'cause
that because
Yeah.
I'm curious now that you said that because I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. Like, if
Well, because I mean, think about it. Like,
Yeah,
as
but
far
why
as-
would they go find J-Lo? Like, no, I think those
Because
black people.
that's what they do. Like, that's the whole thing of the Grammys is like, to find like that's how they have like all like the different like mashups of like different groups and stuff, and like putting Dolly Parton with I don't know.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, just stuff like that where they do because they want, because they know people are going to talk about it. They want,
Yeah.
like stunt casting, I guess, for lack of a better term, to draw people in. I guarantee you that was not some black folks.
we're gonna have to look for that one up.
Yeah,
Because
we
I mean,
gotta
think
look
about
that
it. As
one up.
far as like in the upper echelons of Hollywood, that's not black people running everything.
Right.
true.
That's true.
We don't even remember.
Well, you know,
BET.
Brian.
You know they sold it.
They sold it. Byron Allen bought the Weather Channel.
Oh, really?
It's owned by black people now.
Well, so,
Byron,
yeah, let's
Which
watch
Weather
some other
channel? Is there only one weather channel?
I guess it is because
Yeah,
they
I
were
think
talking.
there's the
There's only
only-
Is
one.
it the news?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
don't
were talking
No, it's
about
just
it
the Weather
today.
Channel.
They
Okay.
were talking about it today. Byron Allen
Oh,
owns
that's
it.
beautiful.
That
Go
is
Byron.
awesome.
Go Byron.
Yeah, so he
So-
bought the Weather Channel.
So moving forward, because we're coming to an end, as far as with feminism, how can the everyday woman, regardless of race, how can the everyday woman make a change with a feminist footprint?
I would say I think probably the most important thing is to kind of like what I was saying earlier with the Matrix of Domination that Patricia Hill Collins talked about was kind of thinking about where you exist in the world and understanding where you're privileged and where you're not.
Right.
Because I remember in one of my classes one time there was a girl who was a lesbian and she said that she didn't really like making friends with straight people because um they just tend to be homophobic or whatever. She just didn't like she just just for her I guess just like her own mental health or whatever. She's like, I just try to avoid being around straight people or making friends, establishing like relationships with straight people outside of people like in my family. And at first I was like, well, not all, I'm straight. I'm not, that's not all straight people are like that. Like, I just
Right.
do. But, I mean, I kind of had to think about it too from her perspective, or rather, I had to kind of think about it for a second in kind of like kind of like flip it a little bit and like, okay, so like me as a black person, I tend to not um rather I've really kind of rethought my relationships with white people that I've had over these last few years here.
These
And
last few years specifically, sorry.
and I tend to, I mean, outside of work, where I, have to interact with them, but, just in like my personal life, unless you're a white person that I know understands institutional and systemic racism and like the role you play as a white person in maintaining, this white supremacist patriarchy that we all exist in, you know, um, I can't really be friends with you. So I kind of had to think and, just kind of like put myself in her shoes
Right.
within the context of my blackness and versus her lesbianness or her queerness, and I kind of understand what she meant as far as why she was apprehensive about having
Right.
relationships with straight people,
Very true.
and I kind of had to get that. And that was kind of one thing that I realized, like, as a straight person I have privilege. As a cisgender person, I have privilege in that I don't have to worry about, when I go out in public, if I have to use the bathroom, like if I go into the, going into the women's room,
Right.
is somebody gonna like attack me? Is that gonna be an
Mhm.
issue? I don't have to worry about like holding hands with, like a partner. Is somebody gonna walk up and bop me up the
Yeah.
head because,
Hit me with a brick.
because but
Yes.
like gay people like or queer
Yeah.
people, that's something that like a lot of them will think about or be cognizant of
Right.
their surroundings
Right.
before they can even do like something
Right,
simple as
right,
that.
right.
But at the same time, as a black person, I still have to be cognizant of my interactions with law enforcement because I mean that's
Yes.
a thing that
Sandra Bland.
so that's an issue. So I think probably like the first thing that anybody can do is kind of really to think about the ways in which, and especially for men, um to understand that, especially for black men or other men of color, is that like, yes, the world is very much against you as a black man, but at the same time, you are a man in this society. So when you're walking on the street at night, you're not worried, you're not, keeping an eye in the back of your head worried about getting like pulled into an alley and raped. Like that's just not something that
I don't know now.
that's just not something that men think about.
Maybe now.
Oh, I mean, yeah, but it's not. It's just not. That's
It's
not.
not, yeah, it's not their focus.
Yeah, that's not.
As much as a
It's not.
woman.
It's not front
Not
of
as
mind.
yeah.
It's not as front
Because
of
when we
mind
go
for men as
outside, I'm
women are.
probably going to be a little
Yeah, I mean,
stressed.
you get your, like your keys through your fingers. So again, like I said, probably like the first thing would be just to kind of like think about where you sit in relation to privilege
Right, right.
versus marginalization. Um, Also, too, uh, excuse me. I would just say kind of read what you can. Now that's, kind of being able to have a formal academic training in,
Yes.
in feminism. That's definitely a privilege. Not everybody has the ability to go to college and take
That's
classes in
so
gender
true.
studies. And our education system, like we don't have gender studies in, which I think we should, an age appropriate, understanding of gender and of gender norms and things like that, and just the way men are socialized, and that's a whole nother conversation. Um, so if you can, um, if you have access to a library or if you're able to read, like definitely read read things written by women, specifically women of color, if you can. Read different things. I had a class called Feminist Foundations where we only, like, literally the only things that we read all semester were things written by women of color and queer women of color. So I read stuff by, like, Native American women that I never would have read, by Chicana women, Asian women, Native American, Middle Eastern women that I never would have read. So try to read people that don't look like you. To really try to get, like, a better understanding of things that they experience. Because one thing I noticed, kind of like the similarities between similarities and differences rather between, like Chicana feminism, rather between the Latino community, the Chicana community, and the Black community, was that, like, there is, like, a great, like, pride in community, but at the same time, like, for a lot of Latinos or Hispanics, there's still, like, very much, like, a strong, like, cultural tie, because they weren't taken from where they were,
Right.
and completely transplanted across the transatlantic
Right.
voyage.
That's
So they are able to kind of, like, enjoy their culture in a way that Black people aren't. Like, we had to make our own culture.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, so just try to read as much as you can by people that don't look like you. I'm trying to think what else. That's pretty much it, and just kind of really try to, like, unlearn a lot of the things that we've been taught by society, by the way, like, how girls and women are supposed to act.
Yes.
Really kind of try to challenge that, try to challenge, like, some of the norms that are really, like, a big part of our society, that I still maintain. Like, there's still ways in which that I try to check myself, as far as, like, with queerness, and and seeing people and stuff, and, like, things that pop into my head, and I'm like, no. I remember one time I saw a guy on campus at UNT with, like, these pink sneakers on, and I remember thinking, I was like, you know what, he must be really secure that he's got on these pink shoes. But then I was like, you know what, why am I thinking that? Why am I assuming that he's a straight guy, who's secure? Like, you know what I mean? Just kind of like, why am I making these assumptions about this guy?
Right.
Just
when,
based off the color of his
yeah,
shoes.
just based off the fact that he's got, like, these bright pink sneakers on. So yeah, just kind of really, like, when things pop into your mind, just like,
Just
why am I
unlearn
thinking
it,
this?
question
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like,
So
like when someone sees a black woman, oh, she's gonna hurt me, or she's gonna curse me out,
Or
'cause
she's gonna be angry and bitter.
yeah.
yeah. Like, why
Or she
am
has
I thinking
5
these
kids
things?
with 6 baby daddies.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to Grown Folks Talking. Another Wednesday. I had so much fun here. As you know, follow me on Instagram at Brea Brea Marche Marshae, and also follow the Grown Folks Talking Instagram at Grown Folks Talking Podcast. Also, would you like to give out your Twitters?
Sure. My Twitter is adubs80 adubs80. Warning: I also talk about abortion a lot because I am an aggressive pro-choicer. So just FYI, that's a whole other conversation we can have another time. But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
so I tweet about abortion and feminism and
Fun
Black Twitter
times.
shenanigans.
And what?
And
Black Twitter. I love Black Twitter. I'm thinking about
Twitter's the
making
best.
another Twitter. I deleted mine years ago, but I'm thinking about making another one after I stalked yours.
Yeah, I love Twitter.
But yes, thank you so much, guys. Mom, you want to give out your little outro?
Yes. Go, Bria.
Okay.
I had a brain freeze.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Tune in next Wednesday for another fun conversation with grown folks talking.
See you
Thanks.
next week. Bye.
Bye.